Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar on involving parents in sexual violence prevention. With us today are Dr. Barbara Thomas, the Director of Counseling and Psychological Services at the University of San Francisco, and Dr. Peter Novak, the Vice Provost of Student Life at the University of San Francisco. The webinar will go about 45 minutes, and if there are more questions, we'll continue on answering questions. We'll have a hard stop at 11 o'clock. We want to respect your time. I'm sorry, a hard stop at noon. We want to respect your time and make sure that everyone can meet the other requirements of the day. So in the past, we've done a Q&A format. It's a little bit different today. Dr. Novak and Dr. Thomas will simply be presenting some of the research and some of the experiences they have working with parents at the University of San Francisco.
If you do have questions, actually, you can type them into the questions box, and we will try to get to them if we can at the end.
Yes, exactly. You can also, tweet. We'll be live. Ashley Schwade will be live tweeting the event, and so you can also tweet questions at her, and she will get them to us. You can do that at Campus Clarity or at the hashtag parents.
Also, some resources will be tweeted as we talk about them from Ashley, and they'll be included at the end, and you can always contact PAX at the end for any of our resources that we mentioned.
Exactly. We'll have a blog post up hopefully by the end of today or early tomorrow that just puts up some of the citations and links so you'll be able to fully access everything we talk about today.
Okay, so let's get started. Let's talk about parents. You know, in the past 5 to 8 years, I know the staff at USF have lamented the role that parents play. Oftentimes, we have dozens of descriptors for parents that we all know about. I don't need to list them necessarily. The over-involved parent, the under-involved parent, etc. But what we want to discuss now is the role that parents are beginning to have and oftentimes don't have around issues of sexual assault, intimacy, substance abuse. And then how we can solicit their help as we begin to change the model and culture around these very fundamental issues. So it's interesting at USF, and I know many of our schools now have departments entirely devoted to parent relations. And some of your schools might have that with a small staff of 1 or 2 up to some larger numbers. And one of the difficult things for me in parent relations departments often is that those departments are not under the auspices of student affairs, but they're in development or advancement. And they help to manage the relationship between the university and oftentimes higher net worth parents. And in reality, there are so many ways that we could use those staff members to help us communicate more effectively with our parents, throughout the institution. And for parents of students who are maybe the first generation, for parents, for international parents, a variety of things where we could really provide more information. So I'm actively trying to change that at our institution. But we hope that this webinar provides both some theoretical and practical information on how to involve them in primary prevention of sexual assault. So that you know, and I'm sure most of you have been experiencing this, some sexual assault advocates and agencies have been very deliberate in their messaging around how students and their families choose a university. And so it really does begin with admission-related events and how you're presenting yourself to those parents. So with us, more and more I do admissions-related events, and I've done them for the last 5 years. And I'm finding parents asking questions around Title IX and Clery and the SAVE Act, and I am surprised by how knowledgeable they are, how much information they've got, until I realize that many of our friends and allies in the nonprofit sector were actually helping to prompt some of those questions. And so I have found that parents want to have honest and direct information from the university. And the more clear you are and transparent you are, I think the better. So I'm going to give you a few of those questions that parents are being asked and go through them briefly with you so that we can talk about them. There are many others, but these are the ones that I have been asked at USF, and I think it's pretty interesting. A lot of people want to know, is your university one of the ones that is under investigation from the Office of Civil Rights or the Department of Education? And there are many. There are probably over 100 now. But if you are or if you aren't, it's important that you acknowledge that the investigation process is one that really aims to help improve your own, response to sexual assault on campus. And oftentimes, someone can submit a complaint that, with the OCR, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're under investigation. But being honest about this question is really, really important. What are your prevention programs, and are all of the freshmen or students required to take them? This will be our 4th year using Think About It, which means that by the end of this fall semester, all of our students at USF will have been trained with Think About It, which again is only a baseline, a foundational course. We have so many other things that we'll talk about in a minute briefly. But yes, to answer this and to use Think About It to your advantage and say that it's a cutting-edge program is really helpful. Now, one of the things that I know may happen to you, when you do a large presentation before an admissions group, with hundreds of families there, oftentimes the first question out of the gate, let's say in San Francisco, for us, it's about housing oftentimes. You'll find that the next question will be a follow-up on that, and the next 3 to 4 questions are follow-ups on that. So if your first question is about sexual assault, chances are that's going to guide many of the next questions, and you have to be able to finesse and judge that very carefully. And so we've done that with a variety of strategies that I'll talk about in a second. But the other option is that if no one brings up sexual assault, do you in fact bring it up yourself? Do you in fact bring that up at admissions events? My answer, and thankfully our admissions people believe that we should and that we do. And I think that's a very good way to do it, to be proactive about it as much as possible, and to develop your own statement that you can memorize or say or have answers to, that you can present as quickly and efficiently as possible. Secondly, if you go online to Futures Without Violence or Culture of Respect.org for both of those, you will see a list of questions. And if you have answers to all of those questions, you will be in a much better place for your admission staff to answer those quickly and efficiently. All right, do you conduct confidential surveys on rape and sexual assault? And these are the questions about your climate surveys. And many institutions don't make their results, available to people outside the institution itself. So that's a question you're going to have answered for yourselves as you move forward. We have not yet done a climate survey. However, the data that we get from Think About It reveals a lot of really helpful information. And one of the things I decide not to share with families is that 60% of our students say that they are sexually active before they even come to campus. And that is parents, I don't know, Barb, what do you think? Parents don't necessarily want to hear that. What do you think?
As the parent of 2 young adults, one female and one male, I don't want that information. I have no illusion that those activities don't occur, but the specifics are not necessarily important to me.
Right. So what you choose to share is also going to be very important. A couple more questions to get to that I think are important. Do you require notification to the police for every report made to the university? The best answer for that is yes. We notify police statistically in the event that something has happened, but we don't necessarily always provide them with all of the information unless the survivor, of course, wants us to. Brief and succinct answer that's very helpful, that still lets them know that the police are notified and the data is there. Do you record the expulsion or suspension on the perpetrator's transcript if they're found to be in violation? Again, very complicated. Many states are now regulating this. There is a bill before the California Assembly which is to require this for all public and private institutions. It hasn't passed yet, but I anticipate that it will. So know what your registrar does when you are reporting a sexual assault. We do report. We say it's a violation of our Code of Student Conduct if someone is suspended or expelled. But sometimes I go further with parents and say, we're so proactive in our sexual assault and Title IX procedures that we had a student who was accused of sexual assault. A report was taken about him, and he decided to leave the institution and withdraw immediately. And we still maintain our investigation and go through the process and let him know that it's up to him if he wants to participate in that process or not. And so in that case, even though a student has withdrawn, we will continue in the investigation, create a finding of either violation or no violation of our conduct code. And in this case, we did. We found a violation and expelled the student retroactively after they withdrew. So that kind of thing lets parents know that you're taking the issue very seriously and that you've got good policies and procedures for doing so. Then the last question, and you can find many more which you should be prepared for, but the last question is, how many reports of sexual assault do you receive each year, and what are your Clery statistics? Now, our friends at Futures Without Violence say that this is the million-dollar question, and how you respond says a lot about your institution. And most people would assume that a small number is a good sign, but it could mean that you have a chilling effect at the institution, and therefore people don't want to respond. So they say, and they actually recommend in all of their questions, what answers you as parents want to hear, or what your parents will want to hear. And this is what they say is the response that you're looking for, that parents are looking for. It says, we're looking closely at what those numbers mean and what they don't mean. The numbers themselves don't create a clear picture of what is happening on campus, but they're a very important indicator of what is working and not working. I actually think that's not a very good response. It's vague. I think it's very vague, and I think the best thing you could do would be to say, that's a really good question, and most people assume that a small number is a good sign. And what we're actively trying to do at our institution is make sure that our policies and procedures and our education is so well formed that students want to actively report. And so we're looking at increasing our reporting over the years as our education and our reforms and our policies and procedures get better and better. That's a better response, I think, that the one that Futures is putting out. But incorporating the question, the data that they've got in the question is really interesting. So, if that makes sense. We also guide parents to our annual security report. Your ASR has a wealth of information in it, and it should, between your Department of Public Safety and your Title IX office and a variety of other offices. And so what we do now is have hard copies of our ASR handy during some admissions events. So if parents want to get down to the nitty-gritty, you can say, what, why don't you come up and talk to me afterwards? I'll give you a copy of our annual security report. You can take it home with you, or I'll provide you with the link, and you can look it up. When we talk in a few minutes about the letter that we send to parents, we include the ASR, and we'll talk about that in a moment. But what our ASR has is all of the different peer education programs, the online programs, who it's geared toward, and what it covers for a variety of different, events throughout the year. So our ongoing and our mandated ongoing education. And parents like to see that we've got specific training for student athletes, for our ROTC students, et cetera. So it's a very good thing to have, and it's very thorough because it also contains, your ASR does, all of your policies and procedures in one specific location. And all your data of reports, it's all there. Very helpful.
I'm going to talk a little bit about stressing the importance of making parents your partners in prevention. I think often parents think, oh, well, that's the institution's job, and are uncomfortable with discussing these situations related to sex and alcohol and the confluence of inappropriate sexual interactions and excessive drinking. And I think the first thing to do is to acknowledge that, yes, these are difficult conversations, and you may have to put up with some eye-rolling and some sneering and some smirking. Nonetheless, they are very important conversations for parents to be involved in. So both soliciting their cooperation and bolstering them in their efforts to have these conversations with their students. You may have seen the Washington Post article, a Kaiser Family Foundation poll that found that 1 in 5 young women who attended college in the past 4 years say they've been sexually assaulted, and 2/3 of those said they had been drinking before the assault. So I think it's important to keep those two paired in their minds. Elizabeth Armstrong at the University of Michigan and the author of the book Paying for the Party found that parents who had extended conversations with their daughters about these issues had safer experiences for their daughters on campuses. And conversely, two populations that were found to be at higher risk were students who were overprotected and parents uncomfortable to have a conversation, and our first-gen population. So really talking to those first-gen parents who may not have had a college experience in this, you know, sex, drugs, and rock and roll is not something that they're particularly familiar with in a college perspective. And then in terms of talking to their sons, I think this advice is good, but I would definitely supplement, you know, she's drunk, it's illegal, look out, you'll get in trouble, with a conversation about mutual respect, about decision-making around sexual interactions, about getting consent. So expanding what one might say to your male students who are going off to college. Teresi and his colleagues have done some research, and they found that parents who were educated about binge drinking and able to convey that information to their students were encouraged to talk to their students before they went off to college, had sons and daughters who had lower drinking tendencies and fewer consequences of their drinking behavior. So giving parents information in advance of their students coming to the university so that they have specific talking points. Wood looked at the parent versus peer influence and found that there were higher levels of perceived parental involvement were associated with weaker relations between peer influences. In other words, parents still outweigh peers in these types of conversations, and that parents can continue to have this influential role. TESTA created a program called Parent-Based Intervention, which was designed to reduce alcohol-involved sexual victimization in first-year students, and found that moms get to take this load, who discussed the parent-based intervention with an informational handbook that was provided by the institution prior to the students coming to school, that those who went through the parent-based intervention had students with lower incidence of incapacitated rape in the first year of college. And then finally, Fromm and her colleagues at UT Austin measured college students' perceptions of their parents' awareness and caring during the last 3 months of high school and midway through their freshman year. And if the students thought that their parents were aware, informed, and cared, their drinking behavior and thus their risk for sexual assault was greatly reduced for both men and women.
You know, it's interesting. In preparation for this webinar, when we've been developing, you know, our own resources for parents, and we'll talk more about those in a minute, but I'm realizing more and more that if we provide that information to parents, you know, specifically about some of this research, it will help us. And so we're going to add this to our letter that goes out in about a week and a half, just so that we can make sure that they know that, you know, this has been researched and this is really important information. So it's great because I think we continue to improve our own parent relations as a result. Pax had a question for me before we began about should we have what did you
so we were talking earlier today as whether or not you show parents the Think About It program before.
You mean, do we sign them up for it?
Sign them up? Yeah. Not just show it to them.
Yeah, you know, I would not be inclined to do that. I think instead, and I had a conversation with folks here at Campus Clarity, Barb and I did this morning, about saying, you know, maybe we develop something specifically for parents that shows them elements of the harm reduction strategies so that they can help validate those, and then also ask, you know, give them some education on how to have these conversations. And I think if we could create a small course that did that, that would be the most effective tool that I think universities could use. So if you guys think that's interesting, you know, I don't know, tell Pax. But I think it would be. I think it could be very, very helpful to help change the culture.
And I'll have my email address up at the end of the presentation, so you're welcome to email me with suggestions or comments or feedback on the webinar. And I also just want to add that if other questions come up, to please put them in the question box, and or tweet them to Ashley at Campus Clarity. and we'll try to answer them during the webinar.
You know, an additional myth that I think needs to be addressed in your conversations with parents, in addition to the fact that they think they may not have influence that they do, is the idea that, oh, this is what college kids do. They binge drink, you know, rock and roll. Right. And I think it's very important to differentiate between, okay, they're having a beer with their buddies and binge drinking. And the majority of students tend to not have a sense of where that line is. So some just education about what that would look like if they were binging. We had a focus group with a group of students who had been sanctioned for alcohol abuse on campus. And when we asked them, well, what did your parents think about that? Their response was, oh, they expected me to drink, which was the wrong response. So somehow to get the parents on board with, okay, you might say, we could see you having a glass of wine with dinner or a beer watching, you know, the football game, but we are not expecting you to get sloppy drunk.
And I just want to add that we know from research that students overestimate how much their peers are drinking.
Right.
And so, and that's when they kind of reinforce that social norm. And if parents are also doing that, that's probably problematic. So there's also information that you can get through, think about it with your campus climate surveys. And if you convey some of that to the parents so they know that actually students aren't drinking that much, then that will give them more realistic expectations about what their students should or should not be doing.
Yeah, I'm thinking a course more and more would be a really helpful thing. So sorry, more work for you guys, but I just think it would be really helpful. Okay, let's go on and talk about a letter to parents. And this is something that a lot of nonprofits are recommending. I know that Futures Without Violence recommends it. And I have found that it's incredibly helpful to do. It really lets parents know that you're proactive, that it's a good place to go to school, and that you've got your stuff together, as it were. So Barbara and I will talk a little bit about that, and a sample letter will be available for you to download as well online. And you know, I can think you just log in to look for it. So we can talk about that later too. But let's start with looking at the letter itself.
So one of the things that we start to communicate right up front, first of all, is that we are a pretty safe campus, and give them some data around all of the programs and services that we have that reinforce the safety efforts that we make.
Yeah, not just around sexual assault, but you know, any other safety protocols that you've got, whether it's blue light, you know, apps that you use, all of that sort of stuff can be very helpful. And then a link to the annual security report, as I said before, so they can actually read the data if they want. I think it's a very helpful thing to do.
And then the appeal to their assistance in preventing issues that would occur, and here's where you can infuse some of the information around research about how important they really continue to be in their students' lives.
Yeah. And then we talk about, think about it, and we say, look, we've implemented this great online program. It's required for all students ahead of time. It's won awards. It's very proactive. And then you can send them a link, and we do this in our resources, that shows them our Think About It page under Health Promotion Services and what we do. And once, if they're there, if they go there, then they can look around and see all the other programs that we've got, and we think it's just very helpful overall. So we do provide that resource in the letter as well.
Again, recognizing that these discussions aren't easy, particularly if they are parents who have not been engaged in this kind of conversation in an ongoing way. One of the resources that we recommend is Jackson Katz's TED Talk entitled Violence Against Women. It's a men's issue, and encourage them to view this with their students and respond to questions that their student may have on the basis of this. One of the things that I just want to add here is I think we need to acknowledge that this is a rather heterosexist perspective on sexual assault, and that it's very important to encourage parents of students who may have a different sexual orientation to look at sexual assault as well. So this is a situation that occurs in same-sex relationships as well as opposite-sex relationships, and we want both those parents to feel welcomed and to feel like they have something that they can share with their students around prevention.
Yeah, Jackson Katz is actually, very good about, not being heterosexist, but I think Barb's point is incredibly valid. We have so many issues, I think, in San Francisco around some of our young gay men who might be just recently out of the closet, and issues related to them being in the gay community, and in many ways being taken advantage of. Older men who are much more experienced and who have been part of the gay community for much longer. It's really an interesting dynamic for us at our school. But then one of the things that we do, since we're a Jesuit Catholic school, and we recognize that not everyone is that we put this statement in because we wanted to make sure parents understood that we are not co-opting the culture with which they may have raised their children. And we want to value and validate that. So we just say, review with your students the values and mores that have underpinned your family and that arise from your tradition. And we think that helps to be very conscious of the different traditions and faith traditions or no faith traditions of our families that come to our institution. Only 33% of our students are Catholic at USF, and so we've got a wide range of cultures and families here. And I think the research also supports this too.
Absolutely. Although I have to say, and we're going to talk a little bit about my new student orientation involvement, but sometimes parents think that their values and mores have been accepted wholeheartedly by their students and can be somewhat naive about activities that are already going on.
Yeah, it's the double-edged sword of providing so much information to parents or not, what we decide to do. So the other thing that we really suggest is that parents come to the orientation sessions that Counseling Center does, and Barb will talk about those briefly.
So I hope that each of you have on your staff the straight talker who has the street credibility of also being a parent, because I think that is an important connector with parent orientation when you are talking about things related to sexual interaction and substance abuse and a number of other things. I have an opportunity to meet with the families every orientation that we have, and have enjoyed doing this over the years. And I think you have to not be mincing words in these sessions. I think candor is important, and it's a place to challenge parents a bit about how they can be supportive of their students while at the same time articulating what their expectations are. I mean, this goes across the board. I even talk about finances and cutting down the money tree and talking candidly with your students about finances. Some parents find that more difficult than sexual interactions. But I talk about roommate interactions when one person is coupled and the other person isn't, and what is fair to be going on in the residence halls. And I talk a lot about teaching individuals, their students, to have a battle buddy, wingman, etc., around drinking and sexual interactions, how important it is to be a good friend and to have good friends as part of prevention.
We just had a question for Barbara that just as a follow-up to that. Are there any common questions or concerns that parents raise during these family orientation sessions?
Well, it's interesting because many parents assume that their student would be the one without a partner and behaving appropriately.
Right.
So there's certainly questions about how do we respond to this within the residence life structure, what goes on. I get questions about, the number of students who might be in recovery and where can they find some support. And I get a lot of questions about if we have concerns about our students and their alcohol or drug use
behavior,
or their sexual behavior or other behaviors, how can we get support? Who are you going to call? And that is me.
Yeah, well, that's a great segue to one of the things we also say in the letter is this. Well, this is what we do. We tell parents that if they want to have coaching on these conversations, they can call our Counseling and Psych Center before the families arrive on campus. And Barb makes the staff available to help have those coaching conversations, and you get calls before students arrive.
Absolutely. Both related to prevention and also individuals who may be coming to us who have been traumatized.
Yep, that's right.
It's important that they know what resources are available and what support is there for them.
Yep.
So yes, we get many questions.
I really think this is one of the simplest things you can do to communicate this to parents, to say, look, our counselors are here to help coach you through those difficult conversations or any question that you might want to have in relationship to your student coming to school. That alone is an inexpensive but invaluable service that your counseling and psych services can offer. Then, it's important to ask your students to help, because one of the things we include in the letter are quotes from students about how their parents may or may not have spoken to them. And again, it's validating all the things that we've been talking about. A student who says, for example, I would want my parents to reinforce how important it is to have someone to look out for me if I'm making bad choices. And so all of the things that we talk about in harm reduction, we want to revalidate by having student quotes in this. Now, a really good resource for this is also, so this is what we do. We include in the letter. We say a select group of last year's students responded to the question, how would you have wanted your parents to talk to you about sexual assault prevention before coming to school? So it's a really good thing. But Futures Without Violence has a great, small section on this that is a video of students talking about just about ready to go to college. One of them says, I'm leaving tomorrow. We have a brief, you might not be able to hear the video of this. I don't even know if it may not play, but let me go back. Oops, sorry, going back. There we are. It may not play, but it's a really short 2 to 3 minute video that has great students, very diverse group of students, talking about in a student that's got 2 moms who talks about how they could be better prepared for coming to school. And Futures Without Violence has a downloadable sort of guide that parents could clip out and give to their students if they want, print out and give to their students. It also talks about downloading Circle of Six, the Circle of Six app, which many of you might be using. And so we include all of this information in our letter to parents under the resources page. We do a general narrative 2-pager, and then the 3rd page is all resources. And now I'm going to include many of the research articles that Barb has just presented here. So this video is fantastic, detailing whether parents are ready, how to make them ready, and how to have that conversation with their students. Another really good resource is thecultureofrespect.org, and they've got a very thorough series of questions that they ask parents to ask universities that we started this webinar with. Very helpful to do. So again, this video is great, provides great information, and a really important thing for parents to see. So we link them directly to this.
I think another thing that you can stress in your conversations with parents is that we have all sorts of campus organizations, and I'm sure you do as well, where people can be involved in preventive work.
That's right.
So be it related to sexual assault prevention, violence, intimate partner prevention, looking at the drinking culture, etc. So encouraging parents to encourage their students
to help us.
To help us,
That's
exactly.
Right. Yeah, it's we can always use more support and always develop these with the help of students. So there's some good information about Circle of Six and things like that. So now I just want to switch to the tone a little bit and the topic, because all of this is all of this previous to this has been about how we can really help parents proactively before an event happens, before they come to school, while they're in school, and things like that. But what tends to happen once a student has reported that they have been sexually assaulted, and this happens both for the respondent as well as the claimant, right? The person who's been sexually assaulted and the person that they say has committed the sexual assault, is that immediately it sets up a different relationship between the parent and the institution. For the student who has been sexually assaulted, the parents, are demanding justice. They want to know immediately what the university is going to do if they find out, of course. And then for the student who is the respondent in the case, their parents may immediately seek legal action. And what happens, and tends to happen, is all of a sudden the institution becomes an adversary. And what we're going to try to do is to continue to support the parents in these cases by giving them additional information. And we feel that in so doing, we will show them the care that and the concern and the response that we've got for their own child in a way that might reduce some of that adversarial relationship. So one of the really great things I think you can see is between staff members. I would really recommend that you provide a sheet or an info sheet that goes through the process for what is going process, the sanctioning process and all of that. But then provide resources, and I'll show them in a minute, that are fantastic, and we've created this now for families, that are the do's and don'ts of what happens if your child has been sexually assaulted. And to show that level of care for parents and to give them some helpful guidelines and conversations, and to again recommend that they call Barbara Thomas and her staff in our counseling center. When you do that, when you provide them with those resources, I think it really does help them to understand better the care for the individual and the care overall that the university has for their students. And that can go a long way.
And I might just say, I have spoken to as many parents of sexual assault victims. I have also spoken to parents of alleged perpetrators. Mm-hmm. It is extremely traumatizing for the entire family when these sorts of things start to roll. I've worked with some, in my situation, young men who've been accused of perpetrating sexual assault. And I think in that same way, we don't want to alienate one group at the price of the other.
That's right.
That we need to let them know, too. They can consult. They can get confidential support as well.
So we've developed some of these resources now, and we will continue to, I think, investigate better models and better ways of incorporating parents. I think the Culture of Respect has fantastic resources, and if you haven't seen it, please look them up. One of the things that they include, and this is what we've done, is we've taken their do's and don'ts for parents and put it into a single guide for our families. And again, families, just because we recognize that not all students come from households that have their parents supporting them through college. But do listen and validate your child's feelings. Don't be dismissive of the guilt, sadness, humiliation, etc. It goes through and provides some really wonderful, I think, support structures. And then some of the don'ts. Don't blame your child or yourself. Support, even. I'm telling you, we had an incident one time where the father was livid that his daughter did not want to pursue formal investigations and a variety of other actions. And wanted to declare her incompetent so that he could take over the decision-making and force the university to do what he wanted the university to do. And it wasn't until I had a very frank conversation saying that re-traumatizes his daughter, and that I think he finally understood that. But those are really important conversations to have with parents, and you really need to have them be a part of the process in a more proactive way. It's always fraught. We know, those of us who are doing the work day in and day out, it is the most complicated thing that a university does, our sexual assault investigations and the whole process around them once a report is made. Very complicated. So I just wanted to give you some of those resources. We will tweet them out and make them available. One of the last things I want to talk about is Callisto. And that is a new reporting system that we'll be instituting at USF this year. You may have read a little bit about it. It is an online reporting profile. It's actually it's an information escrow account where students can learn more about your process and procedures and actually do an intake online that has a huge number of benefits. And we'll do another webinar about that later this fall once we've begun it to see how our number of reports actually goes up. Because I'm really, one of the data points from Think About It Part 3, that as I was just looking at the data, was that 36% of our upper division students do not know their resources, both on campus and off, for sexual assault. And that is a huge statistic for us. It means we need to do much, much better. But we found that out, not through a climate survey, but just through the actual data and Think About It. That's incredibly important. So that's why we're going on an all-out education offensive this year to make sure students really know what their resources are and what the response protocols are. So we're just at time now. We're at 11:45. If you guys have some questions, Pat?
Yeah, we have a couple questions that came in, and I want to encourage Dr. Novak and Dr. Thomas have been generous enough to say they'll stay on for a little bit longer to answer further questions. So a few came in, but if there are more that come up, please post them. And there was one question about getting some of the resources out there, and we will make sure to get as many of those as we can up on our blog and to tweet that as soon as that's available. But one of the things that's come up as you've been talking about the possibility of a parent course,
yep.
And we know that there has to be ongoing training for staff, faculty, and students. What do you think would be an effective approach to continuing to engage parents and train parents around these issues throughout the year?
Well, most alumni associations have great parent weekend events. Now, getting your alumni association to say, hey, let's do something on sexual assault might not be something that they're looking for in terms of those things. But I think having, again, a Q&A session with your counseling and psych services, support staff and things like that would be a great way to continue that conversation when parents do come back on campus in mid to late fall.
And if I can say, I think the marketing, you don't have to say, let's talk about sexual assault.
Right.
We have a workshop that we offer entitled Hazards of the Hookup, or the hookup culture. And that's not got quite the sting,
right,
but it gets to the same issue.
Yeah. So that's one way. Also, parent newsletter is a very easy way to communicate with parents throughout the year. Not only can it include academic information, but you can continue to provide support service information in those newsletters throughout the year. We know from data, we know from experience that the first 8 weeks of the semester are the most dangerous for incoming students. And so helping parents understand that as well and reinforcing that is also going to be important to decreasing sexual assaults and changing the culture. But a parent newsletter is a great way to continue that information if you have it.
And there too, I'll offer that our counseling and psychological services staff, and I have to admit it's usually our interns, write letters for each of our parents' newsletters around information related to substance abuse, dating, partner violence, intimacy, etc. So you've got folks likely in your counseling centers who could contribute.
Yeah, there are some new startups actually looking at creating parent portals where you can, and we've been working with one actively, and I would love to continue to develop something like that, because having parents be involved not only in just sexual assault related issues and alcohol and drugs, but in getting your students to graduate in 4 years, and understanding where they are in terms of their major, and a variety of other things to really help parents help us. In the past, and you all know this, we have traditionally said at new student orientation, all right, and this is where you say goodbye to your student, and you no longer will be talking, to the university. The university will only be talking to your student, or to you through your student. And I think things are changing. The relationship with parents is changing significantly, and to be as proactive about that as possible is probably the best strategy.
One follow-up to that. So how do you strike that balance between having parents involved and having them over-involved? Yep. I think another sort of phenomenon of today is the helicopter parent. So yep. You want them involved, but you don't want them...
Yeah, that's how we began this whole webinar,
right.
Is how much do you really want to involve them?
Well, I'll let you all steal my analogy, because when I speak at new student orientation to the parents, I talk about the helicopter parent. And my attitude is that it is all right to be a helicopter. We want folks to continue to be involved. It's the level at which that helicopter hovers. So you've all seen those Medivac films where if they get down too low, the dirt gets kicked up in everybody's eyes and you cannot find your way out. We don't want to hover that low, but we want to be up higher as a parent to see the lay of the land and to continue involvement through our parent relations offices and other ways. I also think that parents need to be given where they can contact. I give the caveat, never call a teacher, an instructor, a professor. Do not call them. That will not be a happy thing for your students. However, it is okay to call other resources. You can contact the Dean of Students' offices. You can contact the Counseling and Psychological Services. You can contact the Parent Relations Office to get you connected. So giving them the place that they can connect but not be completely enmeshed and over-involved.
Those parents who are going to be over-involved are always going to be over-involved, and you know, we've all dealt with them. It's trying to find the balance, and I think parents are looking for resources. They're looking for things to help without being too over-involved, and so providing those for those who seek it out, I think, is going to be a very helpful thing.
So we've got one more. How do you avoid the perception that counseling and psych services is overly involved in communicating with parents? So I would be concerned that there might be a perception that counseling...
confidentiality? Yeah, absolutely. A fair question. One of the things that we do is make it very clear to all of our clients that we would not have a conversation with a parent without written release. So that is clear to the clients. And one of the things that I make clear to the parents is that while we cannot talk specifically about an individual, we are happy to provide generic information on how to approach certain topics. So it seems to work well, and if in fact it is a parent whose son or daughter is involved in therapy, we are very transparent with the client. I was contacted by your parent. I did not acknowledge that you were being seen. However, they did share this information with me. Would you want a release that we can acknowledge you're coming, or should we just continue to interact if they were to call again in a very generic manner? So the conversation with the client is very transparent, and the conversation with the parent is, you're a parent like any parent who can contact us.
Yep.
We're giving you generic coaching.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think, you know, it's not that counseling and psych services is always the front face of all of these educational opportunities that we provide for parents. In fact, they're one of the resources and are very good at answering questions that parents have because they're the ones who deal with them quite substantially on some of the more difficult issues and are the best equipped in terms of staff to be able to do that.
But certainly, you know, in terms of academic-related issues, we might send them to our academic coaching facility, or if they have things related to learning disabilities, mental health accommodations, they would go through student disability services. So I don't want it to appear that we are one-stop shopping or one whatever that is.
Right.
And I will say that when I do talk at new student orientation with the parents, my primary presentation is that of a parent of 2 young adults. And oh yes, by the way, I am the director of the Counseling Center.
Well, we've run over by a few minutes, and if you have any further questions, though, feel free to email them to me, and we can see if I'll get them to Peter or to Barbara, or see if they can follow up. And again, if you have any comments about the webinar itself, any suggestions for future webinars or suggestions for what you'd like to see on the Campus Clarity blog, feel free to email me, and we'll try to follow up on those. So I want to thank Dr. Novak and Dr. Thomas for their time. It's been fantastic, and thank everyone who has participated for their questions and for their time. And we look forward to the next webinar. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Thanks.